Today we're going to be tier ranking my most disappointing reads from 2022. So I have read almost 300 books this year, and obviously not every single book that you're going to read is going to end up working out. So I actually had a lot of books that I wanted to share with you that disappointed me in one way or another. And I actually asked Instagram just to double check if this is something you guys would actually want to see. And the majority of people voted to go with tier ranking a lot of books versus just picking like a top 10 or so. So that is exactly what you guys are going to get. So I basically went about choosing the books that I wanted to put in today's video by the tiers that I ended up coming up with. Like at the end of the day, it's like there were so many more books that technically were like, under 3 stars for me, like books that just didn't really work out for one reason or another, but I couldn't really share everything. So I had to narrow it down to specific things. And how I went about narrowing it down was basically by choosing my tiers and then looking at the books that I think would eventually fit into one of the tiers that I chose. So we should go through the tiers because that will explain what books made it into this video. So first up, we have DNF'd, which is literally, I did not finish the book. For whatever reason, it wasn't working out for me. So I literally put it down early. And then it was so bad that I want to give it a 0. So this is kind of referencing that TikTok sound.
It is so bad, I want to give you a 0, but that's not possible. So I give you a 1.
I'm not sure what books are going to end up fitting into that category, but I really felt like that, explained a disappointment level to an extent. So I really wanted to add it in, and we'll find something to fit in there. And then I wish I didn't waste my time. I feel like this is a very valid one. For whatever reason, it didn't work out for me for, the reason that it didn't. And I wish I just didn't waste my time on it. I read the whole thing, didn't really enjoy it, and I wish that I can kind of get that time back. And then on top of that, it was just not very good for me. So I actually specifically put the for me there to remind myself, to remind you guys that it wasn't very good for me specifically. Everybody's got different tastes, and something that works out for me isn't going to work out for you. And this is all my personal opinion. And just because I didn't like something doesn't mean that, it wasn't a good book. It just didn't work out for me. So I'm not trying to offend anybody's favorite book or anything like that. So whatever, disclaimer out of the way. I hope you understood that, this is all my own personal opinion, not offending anybody's reading taste if, one of your favorite books ends up on this list. So with that said, the last tier that I have is that I was disappointed. And my reasoning for putting that on the top, even though literally this entire video is called books that disappointed me in 2022, is because I don't often get actually legitimately disappointed by a book. If I don't like a book, I usually just write my review, move on, and never think about it again. But there are very few circumstances that I was actually legitimately disappointed. I was expecting it to be either something different or something much, much more than it was. And for whatever reason, it let me down, and I'm still upset about it until today. So those are my tiers. I chose a handful of books that I do think will eventually fit into one of those 5 tiers. And today we are going to go through all those books and put them where they belong. Before we get started though, I just wanted to quickly mention that I'm not actually going to be sharing with you the synopsis for any of these books, because if I did, we'd be sitting here forever. And then also I'm going to try to keep it really simple and to the point as to why I'm putting a book in a specific tier, because technically I have gone into great detail about what didn't work out for every single one of these books on my channel before in the wrap-ups that I've made slowly throughout the year, because I am going more or less in the order in which I read these books. Like the first book that we're starting with is a book that I read in January, and then the last book is a book that I read very, very recently. So basically you can just deep dive my wrap-ups if you wanted to hear more about what didn't work out for me in any of these books. So with that out of the way, let's get started with tier ranking, because that is what we're here for. So first up, I have A Priest by Sierra Simone. So this is a book that I read basically almost a year ago. And I do remember at the time that I read it, I was very disappointed by it because I did go into it with a little bit of high hopes. People were saying such amazing things. The only reason why I picked it up was because of the hype. And then I definitely ended up being very much let down. But I don't think I'm going to put it in the I was disappointed ranking, only because when I had read this book, I ended up making a TikTok with the it was so bad I wanted to give it a 0, but I can't, so I'm going to give it a 1. And therefore, that is why I had thought about that as a tier rank. And therefore, I feel like the only place that, Priest deserves to be is next to the sound that I had made a TikTok of it for. Does that make sense? I feel like it does. It did let me down a lot, and I really think that it was a pretty bad book. People liked it, and that is totally fine. Definitely didn't work out for me, and I actually have an entire rant review video about why it didn't work out for me. So if you did want to hear in great detail why I hated this book, you can watch an entire video of it. But either way, next up, How to Love Your Neighbors. So I actually DNF'd this book very early on. The writing was very much not working out for me, and I knew I was not going to be able to get through the entire book, so I gave up on it very, very early. And then Steel King by Devney Perry. So This is a book that was just not very good for me. This had, I think it was like insta-love or something like that. So right away, I really just did not connect to the romance at all. And therefore, I kind of just feel like I wasted my time a bit. But I also don't think like it necessarily was a waste of time if insta-love does not, bother you. So it just was not a very good book for me specifically. And then next up, It Ain't Me Babe by Tilly Cole. So this is a book that I think I wish I didn't waste my time on, because I mean, it had insta-love again. And insta-love is like, a very big problem for me. Like, I just cannot connect to the romance if they fall in love the first second that they see each other. And that definitely was the case with this book. And the thing is that I was trying to get myself through it because I thought it had a very unique storyline. It's like this girl ran away from a cult. She meets a guy in a motorcycle club. They end up falling in love, and there's a lot of twists and turns at the end. Like, I was trying to love it, but I just was not into it at all. And therefore, I really wish that I can get that time back a little bit. So we're putting it there. And then next up is The Heir by Sophie Lark. So this is a book that just did not work out for me. It was a love triangle, but I really want to read it anyway, even though love triangles don't usually work out for me, because I had read the books about their parents. Like, this is like a companion series to the Brutal Birthright series, which I did enjoy. So I wanted to read like the Kingmaker series because I thought that it had a very cool, idea. But then I just really couldn't get myself into it. Like, I wasn't enjoying the romance, wasn't enjoying some stuff that was happening slowly throughout the book, and all around the board wasn't working out for me specifically, but I can understand why some other people did like it. So we're going to put it there. And then next is Sarah J. Maas's newest release, which is House of Sky and Breath. And unfortunately, I was very disappointed by this, and I'm not going to go into detail as to why, because I do have an entire rant review about this book specifically. So if you wanted to hear my thoughts on why one of my favorite authors ended up on my top rated most disappointed list of this year, you could go watch that video. So anyway, let's move on. Next is Lessons in Corruption. So this is a book that I wish I didn't waste my time on. It was love at first sight. It had a reverse age gap, which after reading this book, I found out is very much not up my alley. And all around the board, I honestly was disappointed by it, but I feel like it just deserves a little bit more to be on I wish I didn't waste my time with it, because I was aware that this was not the best book in the series. It's the first book in the Fallen Men series, and like a lot of people had said, like, look, don't go into it with too high of hopes, but it still is a good time. And then it wasn't a very good time for me. So I just really wish I didn't waste my time on it, because it didn't click for me. But anyway, next is A War of Two Queens. So this was the newest release by Jennifer L. Armentrout this past year, and I was very disappointed by it. Talked about that series way too much this past month, as well as on my channel in general. So I'll just have my rant review for that book specifically linked down in the description below for you if you want to know how I felt about that book. And then next is Look the Part by Julie Ann. So this book, I wish I didn't waste my time on. It was an accidental pregnancy story, and I wasn't aware of that until I started reading it, and I hate accidental pregnancy stories, so I wish that I knew that before I started it so that I wouldn't have wasted my time on it. This next book is The Coppersmith Farmhouse by Devoney Perry. So this book, I honestly think, even though I know a lot of people very much enjoy it, I personally am going to put it on it was so bad that I want to give it a 0. And my reasoning for that is because for me, it was so bad, because for some odd reason, the entire time I was reading this book, I was getting such a bad vibe off of this main guy. Like, I thought that the twist at the end of the book was going to be that this guy was like a serial killer or something. Like, I'm no joke. Like, I remember writing this in my review when I read it, that I just got very creepy vibes off this guy, but he didn't end up being creepy. Like, he was just like a normal guy. That's just the way he was. And because of that, I just very much didn't like it. And I really don't see how people didn't see what I saw when I was reading the book. And therefore, I'm feeling like putting it on it was so bad I want to give it a 0, because like, you shouldn't be scared of the main character in your book when you're reading a romance. Next is 5 Rounds. So this was a book that in the moment that I was reading it, there were a handful of things that I was enjoying about the book, but then there was also a handful of things that was making it really hard for me to actually get through the book. And I feel like at the time that I was like reading it and reviewing it and everything like that, I was being a little bit nice. I think I thought that like I was just in a particular mood, and I think that if I had picked it up at a different time, maybe I would have enjoyed it more. But then as time passed, I kind of realized that I don't think that was the case, and I think that it just was not that great of a book. So I do think that I'm going to put it on it just was not very good for me, because I know that a lot of people loved the book, but for a couple of reasons, it just didn't work out for me personally. So whatever, that is that. Anyway, next is Say You Swear. So this was a book that I also think was just not a very good book for me. At the end of the day, it was a love triangle, and then it also had this trope all the way at the end that I honestly have never read before, but after reading it, I realized that I don't really like it. So I think that, if you were into the things that the book specifically had going for it, you would really enjoy it. And I know that that is the reason why a lot of people really enjoyed it, but unfortunately, I wasn't very into those sort of stuff, and I didn't even know that that was what the book was about before I actually started reading it. So, you know what, it just didn't really work out for me, and that is okay. Anyway, next up is Truth or Beer by Penny Reed, and I did end up DNFing this book. I just wasn't really vibing with like the writing or like the vibe of the story. For whatever reason, didn't really like it, so put it down early. And then Swing by Audrina Locke. This is a book that I wish I didn't waste my time on. I was kind of trying to really like force myself through the book the entire time, and I really wasn't liking it, and I honestly wouldn't have minded if I DNF'd it, but I didn't. So, you know, I wish I didn't waste my time on it and DNF'd it instead, but that didn't happen, so it deserves to go there. And then next is The Right Player by Candy Steiner. So this book was just one that was not very good for me because it had that vibe of like the main guy is lying to the girl the entire time, and he had a reason for it, but I really don't like books where like, you know, your entire relationship is like, you know, set up by the fact that one of them is keeping a secret, and therefore the vibe of the story in itself, because that's literally what the whole book was about, just is not very much up my alley. So it just was not a very good book for me. But if you do like reading about those type of stuff, then it's a book that could probably work out for you very well. So, you know, it deserves to go there. Anyway, next up is Center Mass. This book was so bad I want to give it a 0. Literally though, I did DNF it, but it was so bad that I want to give it a 0. So I really don't know where to put it. No, you know what? It deserves to go on the DNFs just so that we can see every book that I realistically DNF'd, but it was such a freaking bad book that it deserves like less than a 0. I'm just going to leave it at that and we'll move on. Anyway, next up is A Touch of Darkness. So this book, you know what? Honestly, was I disappointed by this book? You know what? I'm gonna be a little bit like, you know, intense here and say that yeah, I was disappointed because I had seen so many good things about this story in general, and then when I read it, I was very much disappointed. Like, it was supposed to be a good like fantasy Hades and Persephone retelling with like an amazing romance, and at the end of the day, I wasn't really feeling the romance. It just, for so many reasons, wasn't working out for me, and I was just like, this is what everybody is like, you know, hyping up. Like, this is the book that like people think is like, you know, at the same level as like Sarah J Maas, like really amazing fantasy romance series. Like, I just didn't see it, and therefore I was a little bit disappointed by it, not gonna lie. Anyway, next is Room for You. So this book, I wish I didn't waste my time on. So I was actually forcing myself through the entire book, and then I was kind of like, okay, whatever. At the end, I'll give it like a 2.5, maybe 2.75, because there were some moments that I did enjoy in the book, but then like the majority of it, like just the way that it was written and the things that were happening wasn't really up my alley. But then I literally got to like the epilogue of the book, and then you found out that that wasn't a standalone, that the series and the story actually continues in the next book. And I was so freaking upset about that I really wish I just didn't waste my time on the entire book, because I literally closed the book and I was so freaking upset because I wasn't aware that I wasn't reading a standalone until literally like the last page. So really pissed me off in the moment. So whatever. Anyway, let's move on. Next is The Gilded Wolf. So I did end up DNFing this book. I just really couldn't get myself into like the world building. It was so heavy on world building right at the beginning of the book, and my mind was just spinning. I couldn't really like, you know, latch on to anything. I was so confused. So I'm like, you know what? I'm really not down for this. So I ended up putting it down early. And then the Summer Games, I did also end up DNFing about halfway through. I honestly, in this very moment, forgot the reason why the book was pissing me off, but I ended up making about like halfway through, and then there was just some stuff that was happening that I'm like, I really don't want to do this anymore. So I ended up putting it down, you know, early. And then Serpent and Dove, I did also DNF because I think I was about like, you know, 50, 60. I don't even know how far I got into the book, but I just was not vibing with any of it. Like, I wasn't really into the romance, wasn't really liking where it was going, wasn't really loving the world or anything else about the book, even besides for the romance. So I'm like, you know what? I really don't want to put myself through all 3 of these books. So let's just give up now. And that's exactly what I did. This next book is Wildcat. So this was a book that I wish I didn't waste my time on. I kind of realized right at the beginning that I wasn't going to enjoy this book, and I honestly should have DNF'd it, but for some reason I really pushed myself through the entire thing, ended up not enjoying any of it. So I really wish that I DNF'd it and didn't waste my time on it. So whatever. Next is Rhythm Court Malkin. So this is a book that I actually DNF'd. Very surprising because Marianne Zapata is one of my favorite authors of all time. But as I was reading that book, I just really wasn't enjoying it for so many reasons. And I'm like, you know what? I cannot put myself through any more of this. So we're just going to give up. And that's exactly what I did. And then Blame It on the Champagne, I did end up DNFing as well because I just wasn't very into the book, wasn't into the romance, wasn't liking really where the story was going, anything along those lines. Gave up on it early. And then The Outpost by Devney Perry. This is a book that honestly, like, I remember just being bored the entire time I was reading it. Like, I wasn't very much into the romance, even though I was like trying to get myself through the romance, but just wasn't really working out for me. So I feel like it just was not a very good book for me. Like for some reason, I just didn't really click with it. I know a lot of people have enjoyed it, but like, I don't know, for some reason I didn't see what everybody else saw, so it didn't work out for me. And then Funny Feelings is also, I think, going to go onto that category where it just was not a very good book for me. I had actually read that book because so many people were recommending it to me, and I've seen so many amazing reviews of people absolutely loving it, being one of their favorite books of the year. I did not see what everybody else saw, and I just very much didn't enjoy it. So definitely think it just was not very good for me specifically. And then next up is Never Enough by Kelly Elliott. So this book, let's see. I don't really know where to put this book. I don't think that it was so bad that I want to give it a 0, but I feel like I just wish I didn't waste my time on it. Like I was kind of forcing myself through this book as well. Like I was kind of into the romance, but it was happening too quickly. I think I remember one of like my biggest complaints about this book was that it took place over the course of like literally 7 days. Like how do you fall in love with someone so deeply in like literally like under a week? So I don't know, like the technicalities of the book wasn't really working out for me, even though I was liking the vibe of the story kind of. So I just wish like I didn't waste my time on it. That's fine. And then anyway, next up is Lingus. So this is a book that I honestly only read because I wanted to officially be able to say that I have read every single one of Mariana Zapata's books. I only have like a couple left on the list that I never really had an interest in reading, but I'm like, you know what? It's only a couple books. Let's read them just to see if like maybe there's like a secret book in there that like, you know, I didn't think I was gonna like that I will end up liking. And unfortunately, this was not one of those books. And I just think that it was a book that was not very good for me. I don't think that it absolutely sucked. And I don't think that I necessarily wish that I didn't waste my time on it, but I didn't very much enjoy it. So we're gonna put it there. And then this next book is also by Mariana Zapata, The Best Thing. This is a book that I kind of wish I didn't waste my time on, even though the only reason why I really read it was because I wanted to officially say that I've read every single one of her books. So it's like, it's not a waste of time if I was doing it for a reason. But at the same time, if that wasn't the case, like if I didn't pick it up because I wanted to officially be able to say that, I really wish I didn't waste my time on it because I very much did not enjoy the book. I actually have a reading vlog for both of those Mariana Zapata books, so I'll have it linked down below for you in case you wanted to like watch me as I read it. But either way, didn't very much enjoy it. So I kind of wish that, you know, I could get that time back a little bit because I was very bored the entire time I was reading that book. But anyway, let's move on. Next is Getting Real. So this is a book that was highly recommended to me by a bunch of people as well as TikTok in general. Like I kept seeing this book all over my feed on TikTok for like, you know, a couple of months there whenever it is that I read it. And I picked it up because of that. And then unfortunately, I was extremely disappointed. But I'm not going to put it on my disappointed list. I'm going to put it on, it was so bad, I want to give it a 0 because I honestly do not understand what people saw in this book. Like it had such bad writing. And actually, I had a few people like, you know, DM me when I like wrote my review and I'm like, oh, you know what? I didn't like the writing. I don't even remember what I wrote in my review, but my point is that I remember specifically people like saying like, oh yeah, you know what? The writing wasn't great, but the story was fun. And I'm like, I couldn't get past the writing to possibly enjoy the story. So I just like really didn't like it. It was one of those books where I'm like, why is this book getting hyped up? So definitely just going to put it on. It was so bad. I want to give it a 0 because I really don't see what people saw in that book. So whatever, I said what I said. Anyway, next up is Praise. So this is a book that I did end up DNFing. This is just like, it was a very kinky book about like, you know, praise and like dub sub dom sort of things. And either way, I just wasn't really into it. Couldn't get myself, you know, into the vibe. So DNF'd it early on because I knew it wasn't going to end up working out for me. And then this book is the first book in the Shadow Fall series. And I did end up DNFing it. It was a reread for me. And the reread, I just realized that like, you know, it wasn't working out. I read it when I was a kid and I enjoyed it back then, but as an adult, it was just not up my alley. So gave up on my reread early. And then the hookup, I did also DNF. It was a very instant-lovey for me. And I did get this book highly like, you know, recommended to me. A couple people said that it's like one of their favorite books of the year, but unfortunately it was not one of my favorite books and I put it down early because I was not enjoying it at all. And then Make You Mine. This is a book that, you know what, I feel like being a little bit mean here and saying that it was so bad, I want to give it a 0 because you know what, I made it not even halfway through the entire book and I'm like, it should be over by now. Like I got a beginning, middle, and end to an entire romance, and then we still had like half a book to go, and I'm like, what could possibly happen in the second half of the book? I already got everything that I wanted to get, so I'm gonna DNF it early because oh, you know what? I DNF'd it. I can't even put it on. It was so bad. I want to give it a 0. I think I gotta put it on DNF because I'm almost positive that I DNF'd it. I don't believe I ever got to the second half of the book. because I was enjoying it so little that I couldn't put myself through any more of it. So unfortunately, I do have to put it on did not finish, but I really think that it was so bad I want to give it a 0 because I don't even know what they would have talked about in the second half of the book. So whatever, it is what it is. Anyway, next up is the American Roommate Experiment. The American Roommate Experiment. Oh my gosh, I was disappointed by this book. I did like The Spanish Love Deception the first time that I read it. I had read it right when it had come out, and then this was like the sequel to it. Like it was about one of the best friends of the main girl from book 1. And unfortunately, I absolutely hated that book. I did make it through the whole thing. Very much did not enjoy my time reading it, and it was a letdown of this year because I was looking forward to it coming out. Like I was excited to read it, and then unfortunately, I absolutely hated it. So I'm gonna put it on my most disappointed reads of the year. And then next up is Beautiful Grave. So this was actually a book that I did receive an ARC for, and I was very grateful to receive an ARC for it because the author herself had reached out to me, and I was so honored when she did that. But unfortunately, it did not end up working out for me, and I did DNF it halfway through. So we're gonna have to put it on did not finish. And then When Gracie Met the Grump, unfortunately, I am going to have to put this book on did not finish because I did give up on it halfway through. But Mariana Zapata is one of my favorite authors of all time, and I was extremely disappointed when I ended up DNFing this book. So I really wish that I could put it on my most disappointing reads of 2022 list, but I did tell myself, or at least I told you guys at some point in this video, that I am going to put every single DNF this year on my DNF ranking. So I'm going to put it there, but just know I was extremely disappointed by the fact that I wasn't enjoying the book so much to the point that I ended up DNFing it. So whatever. Anyway, next up is Catching Cadence. So this is a book that I just wish I didn't waste my time on. I wouldn't have minded if I DNF'd the book. I ended up making it all the way through. Wasn't really working out for me. Wasn't really enjoying a lot of the stuff about the book, but I did get to the end. So therefore, I wish that I could get that time back. Anyway, next up is Icebreakers. So I feel like I just talked about this in a recent video of mine, but either way, I did end up DNFing this book. I know that it was very hyped up. I know that a lot of people enjoyed it. I very much did not enjoy it, and I gave up on it about halfway through or so. And then Meet Me Halfway. This is a book that, you know what? It just was not very good for me. And why I'm saying that is because I had read this book right after I had read Wait for It by Mariana Zapata, and I'm now just remembering that I did just talk about this in my last year ranking, so I'm not going to go into it again. But either way, I felt like it was very similar to another book that I recently read, which was Wait for It by Mariana Zapata, and I was just getting very bad vibes of it because it felt a little bit like, copying of sorts. So, it just was not very good for me because of the circumstances of when I read it and my knowledge of other books and stuff like that. So whatever, I'm just going to leave it at that. Let's move on. Triple Duty Bodyguard. It was so bad, I want to give it a 0. Oh my God, I did not like that book. I don't know how I made it through the entire thing, but it was sucking left and right, and I really don't understand how I got to the end of it. So, I really do think that book was just so bad. It was like a complete fail for me. Really didn't enjoy anything about it. There was so much about it that really, really bugged me. So I'm putting it there. Anyway, next up is Home Game. I did end up DNFing this book. I don't even remember how early on, probably like 100 pages or so. Just wasn't vibing with the story, wasn't vibing with the characters or anything along those lines. So I gave up on it early. And then same goes for Hunting Adeline. I have a very detailed review on my Goodreads as to why I did not very much enjoy this book. So I'm not going to go into it here, but I gave up on it about halfway through. And then Broken Bond. So this is the first 5 books in the Broken Bond series. So we are jumping to the last book very quickly because, I did not actually finish the last book. But the first 4 books, I wish I just did not waste my time on. So the thing is that I kind of pushed myself through the series hoping that it would get better as, we got later into the books, but it just ended up getting worse. And all of my problems that I was having just kept piling up on each other. So I really just wish that I never got involved in the series and didn't waste my time on it. So that is why they deserve to be where they ended up. So anyway, next up is Hate, Liar, and Fake. So this is another series that I wish I didn't waste my time on. And it's actually a 4-book series, but I ended up DNFing the series after the end of the 3rd book. So I just really wish that I never ended up getting involved because I literally, by the end of book 3, I didn't even care enough to see how it all ended. So that should just, tell you enough about how I felt about the series in general. So anyway, next up is A Fate of Wrath and Flame and then A Curse of Blood and Stone. So this is the 1st and 2nd book in a trilogy. And you know what? I'm going to say that it just was not very good for me specifically. I can see that if you are very heavy into fantasy and you like a little sprinkle of romance here and there, it can possibly work out for you, but there was just so much about it that I was not enjoying. So you know what? It just was not a very good series for me specifically to read. And then Tapping the Billionaire, I did end up DNFing. I was liking it right when I started it, but then the second that the sex kicked in, boom, didn't really like it anymore. So I ended up giving up on it because I just couldn't handle any more of it. And then Savage Land was a book that I wish I didn't waste my time on, and that is the first book in a 6-book series. So, obviously I didn't continue reading it after the first book, so I really wish that I just didn't waste my time on the first book because, I don't even know how the series ends because I didn't care enough to continue with it. So, whatever, wish I didn't waste my time on it. And then Always Only You, I did end up DNFing. Ooh, where'd that go? Oh, I just made a mess. Okay. It goes on DNFing because I did end up DNFing the book, as well as Mine for Yours, I did end up DNFing. I really wasn't liking the writing style for Mine for Yours, even though it was a very hyped up book. I kept seeing like 5-star reviews here and there, but I just couldn't get myself into it because the writing was really pissing me off. So gave up on it early. And then also Roomies, I did end up DNFing because I just wasn't really liking the storyline. I couldn't really get myself into the romance, wasn't really liking either of the characters or the scenario of how they got themselves into this situation that they got themselves into. So I ended up just giving up on it. I don't even know how far in, maybe like halfway through or sorts. Doesn't really matter, but whatever. Anyway, The Hating Game, I wish I didn't waste my time on. So I did talk about this a couple of times recently, so I'm not going to repeat myself, but basically I just wish I didn't waste my time on my reread of it. I did like it the first time that I read it, but I did do a reread of it this past year, and I wish that I didn't do that. So I'll leave it at that. And then A Risk on Forever is a book that was just not very good for me because I know that a lot of people really loved that book. They said it was very emotional, made them cry, everything along those lines. I just didn't really connect to it on that level, and therefore it was a very meh book for me all around the board, and I really didn't enjoy it. So I was like trying to force myself to get into it and force myself to feel something for the characters, but I didn't really. So therefore it was not a very good book for me specifically. And then Spoiler Alert is a book that I wish I didn't waste my time on. I just talked about my reasoning for putting it on this tier rank specifically in my last tier ranking video, so I won't repeat myself here because I hope that you guys had seen that video. So either way, next up is Flirt by Adriana Locke. So this is a book that I ended up DNFing. And then also this next book is a book that I wish I didn't waste my time on because I wasn't aware that it was an accidental pregnancy story before I started reading it, because on the back of the book it doesn't really hint whatsoever that that's what the book is actually about, but that's literally the entire book. And I was very upset that I did waste my time on it because, if I knew what it was before I actually like purchased it and picked it up, wouldn't have bothered reading it. So yeah, I wish I didn't waste my time and money on it. But then anyway, the last book that I have is Tempt by Melanie Harlow. So this is a book that I wish I just didn't waste my time on. At the end of the day, didn't really do anything for me. It was a very basic ex-boyfriend, father sort of romance, and I just wasn't into it, wasn't enjoying the romance. I was very bored very often, and all around the board, I just, I wouldn't have minded if I DNF'd it. I didn't, but I wouldn't have minded if I did. So anyway, that is all the books that I wanted to share with you for my most disappointing reads of 2022. So let's see how this looks. I did end up DNFing a handful of books this year, and honestly, I'm very happy to see that because I feel like I have a very hard time DNFing books. It's something that I've been very much working on in myself, of kind of trying to recognize when a book isn't working out for me and when I should just put it down because I just know that it's not going to get any better. I used to always think in my head, I'm like, oh, you know what? Maybe I'm missing something. Maybe something hasn't started yet, or maybe it's just having a slow start, or I'm just not vibing with it in the beginning. But sometimes books get better as you go. You just got to get into it a little bit more. So I always make up excuses as to why I should keep pushing through a book when I'm not enjoying it. And I am happy that I've been slowly starting to notice the feelings of when I just know that a book is not going to end up working out for me. So I am happy to see the amount of books that I DNF'd, even though it kind of sucks that it's I spent so much time trying to read books that didn't end up working out for me. But you know what? I'm happy about the fact that I didn't end up wasting my time on them, because if you look at the books that I wish I didn't waste my time on, there are a lot of books there too. And if only I would recognize that feeling in myself of you know what, this book just isn't working out for me, I could have saved myself a lot of freaking time. So whatever. Anyway, this is it. This is all I really wanted to share with you. So these are all the books that disappointed me for one reason or another. Hopefully you found this entertaining to watch. So if you did enjoy watching my video, please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to my channel if you are not currently subscribed. Also, just thank you so much for watching my video because I really do appreciate it. And either way, with that said, until next time, enjoy reading.